Hey, so the book that I chose to do my review on is Taming the Storm. It was written by Jack Bass. It is about the life and times of Judge Frank M. Johnson. He's a federal district judge down in Montgomery. The thing that kind of drew me to the book was that he's from my hometown of Haleyville, Alabama. That really made me interested in it. There's actually not much said about that here in my hometown, which I found to be very interesting. I wish that there was more spoken about him and we knew more about him. That's one thing I didn't like about the book itself also, is that it didn't touch on too much about his youth and his upbringing, which, since he's from Haleyville, I would have loved to have read about, but that is what it is. The book is fantastic in terms of how it covers his life, and it doesn't just talk about his successes or different types of legislature that passed under his watch or things he struck down or whatever, but all that's great and wonderful, especially as it pertains to civil rights. What it does a great job of is the background that he does this in. It really hit home with me how courageous this man was when it talked about where he did all this in, standing up for civil rights and social justice in Alabama in the late 50s, 60s, was just going into the hornet's nest. I mean, you are not getting out without some type of threat or with actually having physical harm done to you. He actually required U.S. Marshals protection. He had his mother's house blown up thinking that it was his own. His family received threats almost daily. And for him to stand firm in what he was doing to accomplish what he did in Alabama just struck me as inspiring, to say the least. There's a small thing in the book talked about how he stood against a society hell-bent on his own destruction, and that he dedicated his life to standing in the flood and pushing back against it. That also struck me as very interesting, how mentally tough Judge Frank Johnson was. Things that he accomplished, he was so many different things crossed his desk, from the Montgomery bus boycotts to the Freedom Riders to the voting marchers that marched from Selma to Montgomery. He also forced the integration of Alabama state troopers, which I think was phenomenal. And another interesting about that is the Alabama state troopers were the same group that beat up the marchers on Bloody Sunday. So to see them go from beating up marchers on Bloody Sunday to then being integrated with the same type of people that they beat up, just kind of a come full circle type thing. And it's made me wonder why Frank Johnson does not get talked about more in history, especially Alabama history. We're talking about a man from Alabama who made tremendous impacts on social justice and civil rights, especially in the 50s and 60s. It's just, I'm astounded when reading this to find out how many things he accomplished and yet doesn't get much notoriety nowadays, especially in the education system. I mean, and even beyond the civil rights, he helped prison facility reform. He fought for the civil rights of the mentally ill, especially the hospitalized. And just to see this guy do all this and receive the notoriety he doesn't receive, I should say, it's kind of interesting to me. Something else that author Jack Bass mentioned is that he is kind of known as bringing the Constitution to the South, or bringing the Constitution to Dixie, which I think that's kind of explains itself. A good primary source activity that I'd like to do with this, since it has to do with civil rights, is I found this great website, which I'm going to link in the submission, that gives speeches given by different social justice people throughout the history of the United States. It has 5 speeches listed from MLK, 5 from JFK, and 5 from Malcolm X. Those are the 3 I'd like to pick. And I was thinking I could ask students to go to this website for like a homework or maybe a daily grade if we were in the computer lab or had our computers that day. They could go to this website, pick one person, whether it be MLK, JFK, Malcolm X, read their 5 speeches, and give their takes on it. Try to see what the students think about what the person may have been thinking when they said this. And then we'll compare and contrast what other people thought from their speakers' speeches, and just have a good class discussion about that. That'd be a great way to utilize some primary sources and to get students' takes on what these important civil rights leaders thought and had to say at the time.